Well, hello everyone. This is B. Wendy Jackson, your lovely host of the Empower to Empower You podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you have been tuned in since January 2020, if you've been following the podcast, thank you so much for your support. If you have subscribed, shared, reviewed, or rated, I'm just so honored to be here today. If this is your first time joining the podcast, Empower to Empower You is about all things Jesus Christ, mental health, anything to help you think better so you can do better, right? I believe if you change your thoughts, you can change your life. And so I'm really, really glad to have this platform. I have been having amazing guests here, and I'm so excited as we wrap up the 2024 year, which is the fourth season of the podcast. Today we have Mr. Reginald Sherman. He grew up in a religious family in South Carolina, and Reginald faced a lot of adversity from a young age due to being born out of wedlock and raised in poverty by a single mom. But despite those challenges, even having an absent father, he's going to talk about how his faith and resilience transformed his hardships into a message of hope. I like to say that Reginald is a hope dealer. I can resonate with that a lot. So after a life-changing encounter with God, he embraced his divine calling, which led to the creation of his motivational podcast, Real Talk with Reginald D, in October 2022. And now, even within 4 months, when he created this podcast, within 4 months, the podcast became top rated across 91 countries, sharing powerful messages of faith, perseverance to inspire listeners to walk in their God-divine purpose. I'm so honored to have Reginald here. And so we're going to talk about his story of faith, resilience, and a divine calling. Well, hello, Reginald. Welcome to the Empower to Empower You podcast today.
Hello, Big Wendy. Thank you for having me.
You are so welcome, sir. So I like to ask people this question. If you were to identify 5 words to describe who you are, what would you say and why?
Wow. Wow. 5 words. Okay. One thing about me, one of the words is faithful. I always try to be faithful to what I,
5 words.
you know, doing now. I always try to be faithful what I do. Endurance, confident, servant, and all other things, loving.
Awesome. I like to throw that question. I know I did not give you that one offline, but you did good. You
Yeah, that's
you
cool.
were ready. So that you've faced a lot of faith. What role did faith challenges?
Can you go back to
Talk a
that
little bit about how faith.
for a minute? Because it kind of
Yes,
froze
a-
on me.
absolutely. How did faith, in terms of all the childhood challenges that you had, what role did faith play in helping you overcome the challenges that you experienced?
Well, faith was the most critical role when I grew up. Like you said at the beginning, I came from a very religious family, and I was only one born out of wedlock. My mom had 11. It was 11 of them, and everybody else was married and things like that. But we was born out of wedlock, and it was kind of that old time kind of religion kind of thing that they were thinking, their thought process, and things like that. And I was told, as young, about 9 years old, that I never amounted to anything because I was born out of wedlock for some of my family members.
Wow.
Now, you hear things like that. Be honest with you, and you live in it. It's like a reality, right? You're poor, you don't have any money, none of this stuff. But at the end of the day, I believe I knew God. Grew up in church. You knew God. As you got older, you grew and knew Him better. Your relationship got, it's like any relationship. The more you're together, the stronger it gets. And I think one of the things with me was that I could have chose a lot of things in life to try to do to try not to be talked about or whatever the case may be. But I knew that really I had to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I didn't have, I felt, anywhere else to go but to have faith in God and His Word. Because what I always do, and anything I do, if it doesn't line up with the biblical principles,
Yes.
I don't do it.
Mhm.
So God didn't say nothing about me being less than. He never said nothing about me not going to be to amount to anything. None of that.
Right.
He said He knew the plan He has for me, and He said is that one of the plans is He wants to prosper me
That's
and not
right.
harm. So I had to take that, have faith with it, even though the circumstances didn't change in that moment. I
Mhm.
had to hold on to faith throughout the process in life. And that's what
Yeah.
I tell a lot of people.
That's good. What was the turning point for you when you felt that called you to step into your divine purpose? Like, what was that point in your life?
It was years ago. I think 2000, and I can't even remember now, maybe 2009, I think it was.
Mhm.
No, 2006, actually. I started having these dreams. And I always knew that God had something for me.
Yeah.
Everybody has a purpose in their life that God has for them. And I always tell them that it's that thing that's always in your mind, that's inside
Mhm.
of your gut.
Yeah.
Your stomach is growling for it. You just got to put it all together and figure out what it is.
Right.
So I remember back then that I was having these dreams one night, and I had these dreams 3 nights straight,
Wow.
and it woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3 nights straight. I heard myself speaking. And then the dream was a white church. And then outside of that church was a bunch of people in this field. And then
Mm.
I just woke up like in a sweat.
Mhm.
And that happened to me 3 nights straight.
Wow.
So I knew God was calling me into the ministry. I knew it then. So after that third night, I got up, got on my knees, said, "All right, God, I go."
So
That's how.
your obedience led you into ministry and motivational speaking. W- what was it like before God called you in terms of using your voice, being bold enough to speak, being confident? Was that something that looking back, would you say that I was lacking the confidence because of what I had experienced? Would you say that, or what was different?
I believe, yes, I was lacking confidence. I knew
Mhm.
deep down inside that, I mean, I grew up in it. I grew up in a generation of pastors and preachers. I knew how to run a church. I know that. I got a very talented family. Everybody sings, they play, nobody read music, into that.
Wow.
And I'm not the singer. So I said, I got some of the preacher kind of guy. So, and like I say, I just, the confidence thing always pulled at me, a lot of
Mhm.
times. But when God came to me so powerful in that dream, it was like, whoa, you know,
Mm.
this is it, man. You got to go with it. And so I did.
So, okay, let me just, for people who are listening, just to kind of go back and slow that down a little bit. So, you hear God's voice, you know that this is the Lord, you had been conditioned to learn what it means that God is speaking. I'm sure you heard the stories taught and preached about Samuel and how God was calling him. And he went to Eli. He was like, "Did you call me?" And Eli was like, "No, I wasn't calling you." And he did that about 3 times, right? So you had been conditioned. You heard the stories. So you knew that that was God. But what were the steps? What did that obedience, if you were to identify it in the 1, 2, 3 steps, so what was the process after you hear God's voice to move from obedience or to move from hearing God's voice to acting on God's voice? What was that like?
Well, to think about it, well, it was like, okay, what do we do?
Yeah.
Now, I was fortunate enough to have a grandfather that, he built his own churches. And at that point, he was 70 something years old, and he had
Wow.
built them. He had built another church at 70. After he retired from another church, he's like, I'm done. And then God called. He said, man, I got to build another church. But then my cousin was calling the ministry out in California right before he was getting ready to sign to re-enlist in the Air Force. And God spoke to him when he had a pen in his hand and said, I need you to go help your grandfather pastor his church. So he left and he came back to South Carolina. And um, and then he was our pastor, and my grandfather was the overseer. And then I told my grandfather, I said, hey, I've been called to the ministry. So I had help on that part because my grandfather said, this is what I'm gonna do. He built me a podium and put it in his living room in his house and said,
Wow.
you go down to the main stage. You're gonna do this every Friday night, and we're gonna invite people in here in this living room every Friday night. And that's what I started speaking like every Friday night.
That is amazing. Thank God for your family and your grandfather. So he created space for you to practice the gift.
Yes, yes, he was amazing man. He was, and he was Lord. He was the father figure that I didn't have in my life. You know,
Yeah.
I was with him the whole summer. You know, I watched all the amazing things, the church, the laying on the hands, casting demons. I don't see it all, man. This guy was
Right.
something serious, you know. And so he taught me hard work. He owned it. Him and my grandma owned their own convenience store right next
Mhm.
to the house with meat market in it. I used to go down there and watch them run the store and see how business was ran and things like that. And me ended up having an amazing career dealing with millions of dollars,
Mm,
but it's the same concept. I didn't go to college to do this stuff. I just saw it, them run business. So
right, right, right.
that,
Yeah.
that was just the way it is.
Mhm. How did that increase your confidence in terms of he's saying to you, hey, you're gonna be in the living room, this is your podium, we're gonna invite some family people to come over. What did that do for your posture and your confidence?
It made my confidence go through the roof because
Mm,
here is, I call it king, my
mhm.
grandfather, have this
Yeah,
much confidence in me to put all the stuff together for me. And then when I did it, next day, next Saturday, he'd call me to the house, he'd critique me. Do it this way, do it that way, just and I appreciated it. I mean, I really appreciated it. And the crazy part about it, he did over and over and over every Friday night. We was doing this service in his house. And then one
mm,
day he made a phone call to my cousin
mm,
down at the church. He said,
mm.
now he's ready. Put him up there.
Wow. So first sermon was in 2006 or later on?
2006.
And
2006.
what was that like for you?
I didn't like it. Because
Why?
you grow so much as over the years and speaking, you grow
Yeah.
so much, and like my mom, she still got the VCR, whatever tape it was that was recorded. She still listens to the stuff and she still shows
Mm,
people this when they come to her house. I'm like, oh man, turn that off. I don't want to see that. That wasn't. But when I did it, I think the biggest thing when you do hit a stage like that, it's the confidence, man. You may
mm.
not finish it like you should. You may not, because everything comes with time, but as long as you don't crumble in the process, you'll be
Right.
all right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, this is a really good segue into talking about Real Talk with Reginald D. So you started the podcast. Tell us about your podcast and what happened. What happened in terms of how it grew? Talk about that.
It's it's God. That's all I can say. Because
Yeah.
I'm gonna back you up to this. Now, I told you about the dream I had, right?
Yeah.
Okay. After I became a minister, I had um, offers of people call me and say, "Hey, I want you to come preach in my church," you know,
Mhm.
and I would go preach. And then one of the churches said, hey, man, we really enjoyed you. Would you be our pastor? And I
Wow.
said, I consider it. He said, well, okay, let's talk to the board about it. And then I'll give you a call and this and that and the other, right? So the guy called me like on a Tuesday and he said, "Hey, the boy got one question." And I was like, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, you married?" I said, "No, I'm not married." He said, "Well, you can't be our pastor." So I was turned down from that. Now, keep in mind, my family, most of them think that pastor is the ultimate call, you know, in ministry, which is not. It's what you're called to do.
Mhm.
It's not that you can be evangelist, you can be a minister of music or whatever, a musician, whatever. Even the greeters at the church, they call to do it. Everybody can't greet because everybody mad. You can't greet nobody when you're mad. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yes.
So that happened to me more than one time. That they offered me the church, found out I wasn't married, and said, "No, you can't do it." So here I am
Mhm.
torn, like, all right, God, you know, always that less than story that I heard all my life. I'm saying to myself, now, am I good enough? What is this?
Mm.
What is this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, you call me to do this. And I'm to the point, man, all right, I'm like, this ain't right. I'm ready to do something different, so, um,
Right.
but there was one particular pastor who called me and he asked me to come preach at his church. I
Mhm.
preached at his church. And then one night, about that 10 o'clock that night, Sunday night, he called me. I never been in this church before, into that, but Wendy, never been
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
And he said, "Man, my congregation received you so well, I'm willing to step down and give you my church."
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, whoa. By that time, I was like over us pastoring stuff and, all these letdowns and stuff. I was like, I said, no. And I declined it. But God showed me, hey, man, you are good enough. Anybody gonna step down and give you the church and they just met you, he said, you are good enough.
Mm.
So fast forward, I was just speaking in different places and, different, more like men's conferences. Salvation Army had me speaking there, on a regular. And years later, when I met my wife in 2020, we got married. We got married in 2015. We met in 2015. We got married in 2020.
Mhm.
And we went to church one day, but, well, I told her about this dream I had years ago about the church and the people outside of the church.
Mhm.
So we went to church one day and we came home. She said, "Hey, stand up against the wall, you know, and take your blazers off and throw it over your shoulders, but you'll see it on Real Talk Reginald D on the profile picture. And I'm gonna take a picture of you." And I was like, "All right." And I didn't know what she was doing, but I'm like, okay. So she did it. And then she said, "Now you're about to start a podcast." And I was like, I have no idea what a podcast is. I mean, I heard of them. I heard of them. I didn't listen to them. I just, I
Yeah.
just heard a commercial or something. And she did that. And then I started speaking and started letting God use me through this podcast. And then
Mhm.
next thing you know, like you read the stats, man, it went through the roof like quick. And then God
Wow.
showed me. He said, "See, I showed you that church to let you know you wasn't meant to be a pastor." He said, "I showed you the people out that field, in that field." He said, "That's those people in those 91 countries, the multitude that I need you to reach." He said, "Now you get it after all these years?"
Wow. It's so easy to think we know, right? Just make interpretations about something, and we have to ask questions. What does that mean? Because it's not always all about the fivefold ministry.
Right. Right.
It's not always about that. So that's awesome. So talk about your podcast. What is it about the Real Talk with Reginald D podcast?
Well, I think the reason it's doing well the way it's doing it is because it's coming from a genuine place.
Yes.
And when I look at that dream years ago, the podcast was started then.
Mhm.
I just ain't put it together yet. And it wasn't
Yeah.
even probably even the Zit podcast probably didn't exist back then,
It
but
was
it was in the works then.
yeah.
So that's why I believe that, when it happened, that it was meant to happen. And
Yeah.
and one thing I've had people that start podcasts and have been in longer than me or whatever the case may be, and they're like, man, how did you get this thing to where it is? I said, I'm doing it because this is what God gives me to do. He puts things in me. And you
Mhm.
look at it, you could be 10 minutes. That's 10 minutes. It's not long. I'm giving you a cup of coffee. That's what I'm
Absolutely.
doing. But the thing I'll tell people, it takes me a week to come up with 10 minutes worth of stuff. Because
Mm.
I'm trying to hear them, trying to put it all together and stuff like that. It's a process, you know. And I feel like some people, I don't get on podcasts or do a podcast just to be doing it. You got to do things with a purpose. And
That's
knowing
right.
that, it's your purpose to get whatever you got going on or what God has for you, you got to get it out, you know,
That's right.
into the fields.
Yeah. One of the things that you had mentioned, and I'm going to ask you a question as we try to move towards landing the plane. You mentioned earlier off the script in terms of in your bio how you had to learn to forgive your father.
Hmm.
So many people struggle with forgiveness. They carry unforgiveness and don't realize the impact of unforgiveness and how it keeps you imprisoned. I heard somebody say it's like a cancer in your soul, in your bones. And so talk a little bit about how did choosing to forgive your father and walk in that forgiveness impact your just overall life and your spiritual health and your overall well-being and how it allows you to minister to other people.
Well, but Wendy, the crazy part about it, my mom and dad reunited when I was like maybe 30. And
Wow.
I'm 52 now, so they've been together for 20 some years. They're reunited. Now, from when I was born up to I'm 30 years old, my granddad was the father figure for me. Now, I did hear somebody say one time, and it was actually my cousin who was a pastor, he was doing a Father's Day sermon. And he's told the men in the church that do not have hatred, towards your father because he wasn't in your life. He said, maybe God did allow him in your life because he had to put somebody in your life to help fulfill your purpose.
Mm,
And I looked at that part and I said, yep. I said, it had to be my granddaddy to do this. That was God's assignment.
right.
Now, after they got married, I still had, kind of resentment about a lot of things and things like that because, when you walk into your life and then, the better, more I'll start achieving things, I would hear him say, hey, that's my son. I'm proud of him. And that told me that did something to me for a long time. I was like, you ain't do nothing, man. You ain't did nothing. I done this. My granddaddy helped me where I am today. You ain't had nothing to do with this. You
Right.
know.
Right.
So but he would always say it. And I came to the conclusion, like, am I gonna sit here and wear this? This guy's gonna say it every time I achieve something, every time something goes on, he's gonna say, hey, stick his chest out and say, that's my son. You know.
Mm, mm,
I feel like sometimes when somebody is all of a sudden proud of you
mhm.
and says how proud they are of you, let the past go,
Yeah.
and just absorb it,
Yeah.
because he can easily be like, I wasn't in his life, so I'm not gonna say that. I'm not
Right.
gonna tell him I was proud of him. And then what would I think then? I said, man, I'm doing all this stuff and he don't never say anything positive. No, that's how we do, right? So
Yeah.
now that he's putting it out there, I accept it at the
Yes.
end of the day. And our relationship is it's great.
That's
It's
good.
great now, and he's dad at the end of the day. So
Yeah. What would you say, what encouragement would you give to somebody who's struggling with forgiveness? They just keep harboring resentment, and they just would not move into that decision to forgive. It's a process, right? For a lot of people, it's a process. But what would you say to encourage that person who's struggling with that?
I would tell somebody, first of all, get out of your emotions. Let it go, man. Because
Mhm.
it's going to sit there and it's going to eat you up. It's going to eat away
Absolutely.
at you. You know, it's going to eat away of everything inside of you. Everything is good. It's going to eat away from that. Because you got to
Mhm.
look at it like this. What if Jesus didn't forgive?
That's right.
Where would we be?
That's right.
You know, he gives us that. He teaches forgiveness. Why don't we do it? You
That's
know,
right.
you have to do it. Just just forgive it. Just forgive. You know, sometimes people say, I can forgive, I can't let go. Well, I don't know if you forgave or not. You know, I don't know. You know, it's just a whole different thing, you know. And I always reverse it. I tell you, let go, then forgive. You know, stuff like that. But you have to forgive because one thing I've learned about people forgiving people, people forgive who they choose to forgive.
Mm,
You know, if somebody means something to you or can bring value to your life, no matter how bad they treated you, you're gonna forgive that because you like that value you're getting from it.
mhm,
But if you haven't gotten anything from this person, you think all this person did was let you down, then you want to hold on to it and you want to make that person pay, you
mm,
know. But you make them pay by forgiving them, and then they got to deal with the rest.
mhm. That's so true. That's so true. Can you share a success story of a moment that you realize that your whether your podcast or something that you've said in your speaking or ministry had an amazing impact, a positive impact on someone's life?
Wow, I've heard so much stuff, man. I saw, um, I just heard people when they come back with feedback on the podcast, like how that few minutes, that 10 minutes, like they say that changed my life. You know,
Mm,
I'm like, oh, that was just 10 minutes. And it's like, man, you know, it helped me get over this or it helped me get over that. And
mm,
then in the ministry as a whole, I was an outreach minister, right? And I think I ran into so many situations um, that was, you know, that was crazy that I had to be a part of to help people.
mm.
And so I just feel like, you know, God uses me as a vessel. And then he always brings people to you that's like, all right, here it is. This is your assignment. You know, this and that, and you got to like jump on it and things like that. But so many people talk about, and I think the key word is change. They always say
Yeah.
that change me.
Mm. That's awesome. I'm so glad for the impact. So for people who are listening, I know there's so much more you could share, but I really want to drive people who are listening to your podcast. So talk a little bit about where can people find the podcast? How can people connect with you and what God is doing through you and inside you? Take a moment and share that with us.
Okay, well, you can go to basically you type in realtalkreginald.com and it's gonna pop up. You know, you can visit the website, you know, realtalkreginald.com. And then when you go into the website, it gives you all the links to email me for speaking engagements, life coaching, and all of that stuff. You can find me on anywhere you find your podcast. Any podcast network is there. If you just type in Real Talk Reginald D, it'll be there.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, I'm excited to share that in the show notes so people can go and listen to you and be impacted by your message. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, Reginald, if you had 1 minute, 2 minutes to share a word of encouragement or something I didn't ask you, what would you share with us today?
Well, I will share, you know, I would share this, and like I said, if people go listen to the podcast, they'll understand, you know, what my passion is and how I'm trying to drive things, um, with with God in me, pushing me. You know, I feel like people can't get out of their own way. They can't get out of their own head a lot of times about situations in life. You know, it's not. You're not less than. You're not. You are more than enough. You just got to know how to handle your moments. How you handle your moments is going to end up taking you to your destiny. But if you flop every moment that comes your way, you'll never get to where you need to be. Opportunities is everything.
Mhm.
You got what it takes, and it takes what you got. Christ and God didn't make nobody weak, man. We're not built like that. You know,
Yeah.
we're just not built like that. And I think a lot of people get the poor me mentality about things in life. Poor me, poor me. Hey, I was there before, but
Yeah.
I had to figure out, am I going to stay here or am I going to rise above it? You know, and the thing about it, the power is inside of you. I mean, the power that the Holy Spirit is inside of you. It's
Mhm.
what you feed it, it's going to determine how much it grows.
That's
You
true.
got to, but you got to be determined. You got to want what you want in life. That's it. I mean, if you got purpose,
Yeah.
you got dreams, you got your desires, and if you let somebody get in your way, guess what? You did it. And quit
Mhm.
giving yourself a pass.
Mhm.
Go for what God has gave you
Yeah. I love that.
and get it done. Get it
Yes.
done. You'll feel so much better
Mhm.
if you just get
I
it
love
done.
that. I love how you said handle your moments and that will help you lead to your destiny. That's good. That's so good. Well, Reginald, I really am honored. Listen, if 91 plus countries are hearing about you, I'm really honored to be in the 91 countries to hear to host you today and to share your message. And I love even reading your website that he is a force of motivation, spirituality, and transformation, touching the lives of many with his profound insights and genuine passion for uplifting or others. So thank you so much for sharing your impact, your message, your heart, your passion, the ministry that God has given you. I pray that God continues to use you to be the light and to be the salt in the earth and to continue making impact. So thank you for joining the Empower to Empower You podcast. Um, so y'all, I will put his website in the show notes. Real Talk with Reginald. What he said is exactly what I did. Just go to Reginald, Real Talk with ReginaldD.com, and it will come up, and you can join his podcast and even subscribe to him and to his page and all the services that you might want to be blessed with. He even has a shop on his site, testimonials, the podcast, everything. And you can search for the podcast. Also, you can search for social media, Reginald, Real Talk with Reginald D, and connect with him as well so that you can continue to tune in. This is B. Wendy Jackson, your lovely host. Empower to Empower You podcast. I'll be back next week with another empowering message.
Thank you